The morning it all started, I was standing at the edge of my driveway in my red and black checkered flannel shirt, watching the new security gate I just had installed slide smoothly along its track in the bright late morning sun. And for the first time since moving into the subdivision, I actually felt like my property line meant something. The gate wasn't anything crazy, no spikes, no barbed wire, no fortress wall, just a solid powder-coated steel panel with a keypad on one side and a clean, quiet motor that opened it with a low hum. After the string of package thefts and random cars using my driveway as a turnaround, I'd decided enough was enough. The gate gave me control. It gave me peace, at least for about 4 hours. I just finished testing the keypad again and was jotting a note about changing the default code when I heard that familiar rhythm of irritated footsteps on concrete. The fast, uneven march of a man who believed the entire world was late to his meeting. I didn't even need to look up to know it was HOA trouble. When I did, there he was at the sidewalk. Mark Rudd, HOA president, clipboard under his arm, lips already pursed in a way that said he'd come here to disapprove of something. Behind him, two HOA volunteers trudged along, one carrying a camera, the other clutching a cheap tablet. All three men stopped in front of my new gate and stared at it like it was a UFO that had landed in the middle of our quiet American subdivision. "What?" Mark said, voice sharp. "Is this?" I looked at the gate, then back at him. "A gate," I said. "Security, privacy, mechanical wonder, take your pick." Mark didn't smile. "This is not in your approved exterior modifications file." "That's because I installed it last week," I said. "Didn't get around to filing the paperwork." His eyes widened like I'd just confessed to arson. "You installed a perimeter barrier without HOA authorization?" "Perimeter barrier," I repeated. "It's a gate, Mark. It slides very politely." The volunteer with the camera started snapping photos. The other one tapped something into his tablet like he was logging a crime scene. Mark stepped closer, running his hand along the smooth metal. "Do you realize what you've done?" he demanded. "Improve my property value," I suggested. He glared. "No, you've unilaterally disrupted the open access flow of this cul-de-sac." "Open access?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm done being everyone's free turnaround spot. Your driveway is part of the visual experience of this community," he snapped. "It cannot be wall-locked without permission." "It's not a wall," I said. "You're standing on the sidewalk, not a castle drawbridge." He ignored that. "Gates are subject to strict guidelines. Height, color, opacity, automation, emergency override access, none of which you requested or obtained from the board. Height S within city code, color matches my fence and it's on my property," I replied. "We're good." "You don't decide that," he shot back. "The homeowner association decides that." "Pretty sure the county and the survey markers have more to say about my driveway than you do," I said. Mark's nostrils flared. "This is about community image. Residents must be able to see into each driveway. Openness promotes trust. Tell that to the people whose Amazon packages disappeared last month," I said. "That's why I put this thing in." "Isolationism," Mark declared as if he'd just diagnosed a disease. "Your gate sends the message that you don't trust your neighbors." "I trust my neighbors," I said. "I don't trust random strangers who cut through here at 2 p.m. in an unmarked van." Mike, my neighbor from the other side of the street, walked over just then, wiping grease off his hands from working on his truck. He looked at the gate, whistled. "Nice setup," he said. "Smooth track, clean finish." "Illegal," Mark barked, pointing at it dramatically. Mike blinked. "Illegal, that's a strong word for a rectangle that slides." The camera volunteer kept snapping away. Mark squared his shoulders. "This gate was installed without architectural review approval. It is visually intimidating, functionally restrictive, and symbolically hostile." I raised an eyebrow. "Symbolically hostile?" "Yes," he said. "It tells people they're not welcome." "Good," I replied. "They're not past this line anyway." Mark looked like I'd slapped him. "We cannot allow fortresses in this community." "It's 4.5 feet tall," I said. "If that's a fortress, you've set the bar real low." Mark's voice grew shriller. "You have 48 hours to remove this or apply for retroactive approval." "I'll apply," I said, "right after I finish wiring the keypad into the security system." His jaw dropped. "You're planning to make it electronic." "Already is," I said. "Remote open, keypad entry, safety sensors, the works." The tablet volunteer looked up. "Sir, if he's tying this into a security system, we may need emergency access codes." Mark lit up like someone had plugged him in. "Yes. The HOA must have override authority for safety purposes." "No chance," I said. "Nobody is opening this but me and the people I trust." Mark turned slowly, very slowly, like a villain about to monologue. "You misunderstand the nature of this community," he said. "Private security measures cannot function independently of HOA oversight. We must be able to enter when needed." "Why would you need to enter my driveway without my permission?" I asked. "Inspections," he snapped. "Elation follow-ups, emergency tree trimming." "So not actual emergencies," Mike muttered. "Administrative emergencies," Mark added. "The HOA cannot be locked out." "You are not law enforcement," I said. "You don't get override codes, end of discussion." For a moment something flickered behind his eyes, panic mixed with calculation. "We'll see about that," he said. "The security of this community is a collective responsibility. We cannot have closed gates creating power imbalances." "Power imbalance?" I asked. "It's my property." "It faces the public view," he roared. "Your choices impact others. We have authority." He turned to his volunteers. Log this as a Level 3 enclosure violation, possible escalation to access cooperative breach. That's not even a real phrase, Mike said. It is now, Mark muttered. Then he faced me again. Expect formal notice by end of day, I shrugged. Expect me to ignore it by end of day. He stared at me a moment longer, then glanced past me toward the house next door, the one with the dark pickup always parked in the same spot, the one with the discreet radio antenna on the roof. He squinted. Does your neighbor know about this? He asked. He knows about everything, I said. He hears more than you think. We'll see, Mark repeated and stalked off with his entourage, muttering about rogue hardware and unapproved control points as he went. Mike let out a long breath. He's going to go nuts over this, he said. Yeah, I replied. He's already halfway there. You gonna tell him? Mike asked, jerking his head toward my neighbor's house. I looked at the flagged mailbox and the small emblem on the truck's bumper, County Sheriff's Department. No, I said. I have a feeling he'll find out all on his own. And as the gate slid shut again with that smooth, quiet motion, catching the sunlight on its clean metal surface, I knew something for sure. Mark wasn't going to back down. He was going to escalate. And when he did, he'd learn that some gates, literal and legal, weren't his to override. By the next morning, the gate had already become the main attraction of the entire cul-de-sac, drawing more attention than a parade float, and I knew something was brewing the moment I stepped outside and saw three men standing near the sidewalk pretending not to stare at it while very obviously staring at it. Mike wandered over with a mug of black coffee, shaking his head. Mark's losing it, he said. He had a meeting at 7 a.m. on the dot. Woke half the street up telling everyone your gate threatens community unity. I raised an eyebrow. Unity? Mike nodded. Apparently you're creating a fortress mentality. It's 4 feet tall, I said. A toddler could climb it with enough motivation. Exactly, Mike said. That's why it's a fortress. Imagination. Before I could say anything else, the familiar sharp, staccato rhythm of angry footsteps echoed down the sidewalk. Mark appeared marching with his clipboard clutched to his chest like a war medal, flanked by the same 2 volunteers from yesterday, but this time they carried extra equipment, a measuring wheel, a laser level, a binder thick enough to stun a bull, and what looked suspiciously like a pair of bolt cutters. Absolutely not, Mark shouted before he even reached my driveway. This gate cannot remain, I glanced at the bolt cutters. You planning something? Mark ignored the question. We have reviewed your property, he announced, stopping just inside the sidewalk line like he was about to deliver a royal decree. We have determined that this gate is an extreme violation of HOA visual transparency requirements. Visual transparency, Mike muttered. He makes up a new term every day. Mark snapped open his binder. As per section 19b, subsection 3, line 7, that didn't exist yesterday, I said. It does now, Mark barked. The board enacted it this morning. Did the board know they enacted it? Mike asked. Yes, Mark said, then immediately added, that is irrelevant. The 2 volunteers fanned out like crime scene techs, one rolling the measuring wheel along my driveway, the other holding the laser level upright like he expected to discover ancient ruins. I folded my arms. So what exactly is your issue now? Mark's eyes narrowed. You have obstructed community access. Access to what? I asked. Your driveway, he said. People must be able to use it for turnarounds. Mike coughed into his coffee. That's not how property works. This is an HOA community, Mark snapped. Driveways serve the collective. Not mine, I said. Mine serves my truck. The volunteer with the laser level spoke timidly. Angles within city code, sir. Mark glared at him. City code is not HOA code. My favorite phrase, Mike whispered. Put it in a greeting card. Mark ignored him and took a dramatic step forward. As HOA president, it is my duty to inspect all security features installed in this community, and your gate, he jabbed at it with his pen, was installed without my knowledge. That's because it's mine, I said, and also because you would have said no just to say no. That is absolutely, he inhaled sharply, correct. The camera volunteer snapped more photos like he was documenting a crime scene. Mark continued, additionally, your keypad is unregistered. Unregistered with who? I asked. With the HOA, he said dramatically. All electronic access systems must be submitted for approval. We must maintain override capability. I stared at him. So let me get this straight. You want a code that opens my private gate? For safety reasons, Mark shouted. What safety? I asked. Trimming, he yelled. The HOA must conduct emergency lawn or tree trimming when necessary. Choked. Emergency trimming? Yes, Mark said. If your bushes exceed regulation height, we must be able to access your property. Over my gate? I asked. Yes. With bolt cutters, I pointed. Mark followed my gesture and hesitated for one brief, glorious second. Those, he said stiffly, are for visual demonstration only. Right, Mike said. Demonstration of how fast you can get arrested. Mark's face twitched. You underestimate my authority. You overestimate it, I replied. He puffed up. We are issuing a mandatory access demand. Provide AN override code within 24 hours or face escalation. Not gonna happen, I said. You don't get a key to my front gate, my back gate, my garage, or anything else. Mark blinked once like he'd never been denied anything in his life. The HOA cannot be locked out. You're not law enforcement, I said. You have no right to enter my property. I have the right to inspect. No, I said slowly, you don't. The volunteers shifted awkwardly. One whispered, sir, maybe we should check the guidelines again. Mark snapped. The guidelines are whatever I say they are. Mike let out a low whistle. That might be your worst line yet. Mark ignored him. We cannot have random security devices popping up. They disrupt the aesthetic integrity of our homes. So aesthetic safety, I asked. Yes, Mark declared with confidence. Safety is subjective, aesthetics are eternal. Mike stared at him. Are you hearing yourself? Mark raised his clipboard triumphantly. Regardless, we have decided to inspect this gate for violations. He stepped forward too far forward into my property line. I stopped him. Don't touch the gate. I will touch the gate, he announced. No, you won't, I said. Yes, I will, he repeated, and then he reached out. He actually tried to touch the keypad. Before I could even react, a voice cut through the air like a sharp command. Rudd, step back. All of us froze. Mark's hand hung mid-reach, fingers inches from the keypad. Slowly we turned. There he was, my next-door neighbor, Sheriff Tom Walker, stepping out of his truck in his duty jacket, badge visible, sunglasses on, expression stone-cold. He'd clearly heard everything. His timing was biblical. Mark jerked his hand back like the keypad was electrified. Sheriff Walker, he stammered. We were just conducting an HOA inspection. On private property? Walker asked. Without permission. It's HOA policy, Mark said weakly. It's trespassing, Walker replied. And if you touch that gate again, you're getting cited. Mike whispered, oh, this is gonna be good. Walker walked right up to Mark until they were 2 feet apart. Listen carefully, the sheriff said. You don't override private security devices. You don't demand access codes. You don't touch a homeowner's property. I don't care what binder you printed last night. Mark's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a confused goldfish. But the HOA is not law enforcement, Walker cut him off, and it never will be. The volunteers stared at the ground like they regretted every life choice that had led them here. Now, Walker continued, you're going to step back, put down the bolt cutters, and leave this property before you rack up real charges. Mark swallowed hard. But the gate violates nothing, Walker said. I read the bylaws. You don't have jurisdiction over security installations. Mike crossed his arms. Told you, Walker pointed at Mark. Last warning. Mark wilted like a balloon losing air. Fine, he croaked, but this isn't over. Walker smiled just a little. You're right, it's only getting started. And as Mark stumbled backwards, red-faced and shaken, I realized the one thing he never expected. The sheriff lived next door and he had just become part of the fight. The rest of the neighborhood heard the sheriff's warning loud and clear. And by early afternoon, the entire street buzzed with the kind of energy you only got when Mark was humiliated publicly. Half amusement, half dread, and half popcorn from the porch anticipation. I was tightening a bracket on the gate's hinge when Mike came back over, shaking his head with a grin. He's melting down, he said. Saw him pacing up and down his driveway talking to himself like he's giving a TED talk nobody asked for. Is he saying now? I asked. Something about HOA sovereignty and rogue sheriffs, Mike replied. Real normal stuff. Before I could even laugh, a familiar authoritative voice called out from the side, you gonna want to hear this. Sheriff Walker stepped out of his truck holding a stack of printed papers and a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He wasn't in full uniform now, just his county-issued jacket, but the badge on the chest was more than enough to pull gravity into the conversation. What's going on? I asked. Walker opened the laptop on my tailgate. I checked your HOA bylaws over lunch. Mark doesn't just misunderstand the rules, he's blowing past them like they're optional speed bumps. Mike laughed. He does that with actual speed bumps too. Walker pointed at the screen. You are fully within your rights to install a personal security gate. As long as it doesn't obstruct public roads, fire lanes, or emergency response access, the HOA has zero authority to demand entry or override codes. They can request notice. They can't demand control. I knew it, I said, but I'm guessing that won't stop him. Oh, he's already trying again, Walker said. He called my station 10 minutes ago trying to report you. My jaw dropped. Report me for what? Walker checked his notes. He said, quote, the homeowner has installed a fortified barrier with potential for anti-HOA misuse. I blinked. Anti-HOA misuse? Yep, Walker said. We didn't even know what box to file that under. Mike nearly dropped his coffee laughing. What did dispatch do? Walker smirked. Hung up. Before I could respond, 3 loud claps echoed from up the street, Mark clapping his hands together like a deranged kindergarten teacher demanding circle time. Attention residents. He shouted, marching toward my house again. Gather for an emergency HOA assembly. Oh great, Mike said. The Emperor of Nonsense returns. This time Mark had upgraded his entourage, not just volunteers, but a rolling podium with a portable speaker system strapped to it, wires dangling everywhere. He parked it right on the sidewalk in front of my house, dramatically slammed a binder onto the podium, and cleared his throat as though addressing the Senate. We are experiencing a severe threat to community order, he declared through the microphone, though he absolutely didn't need amplification. A few neighbors drifted over out of curiosity, Greg, Lewis, and old Mr. Patterson from the corner house. What now? Greg whispered. I shrugged. Same circus, new tent. Mark clicked a slide remote, and behind him the rolling podium projected a cheap PowerPoint onto a portable whiteboard one volunteer was forced to hold in the cold. The title read, The Dangers of Unregulated Gates. Walker facepalmed. Mike snorted. You're kidding me. Mark clicked again. A blurry stock photo of a steel gate appeared with red warning triangles drawn all over it. This, he bellowed, is what happens when a community allows individual security without consensus. Looks like a normal gate, Lewis muttered. Silence, Mark thundered. As you can see, private gates lead to confusion, mistrust, and, in extreme cases, crime. Crime. Walker asked calmly. Mark jumped. Sheriff Walker, ah yes, well, a crime in the form of gate BASED insubordination. Walker folded his arms. I'd love to hear how a sliding gate commits a crime. Mark clicked again. A graphic appeared showing a stick figure locked behind a gate with big red X's over every exit. If we cannot enter, he said, how can we protect our community? Greg muttered, from what privacy? Mark continued, this gate represents a dangerous threat to the HOA's ability to maintain order. There it is again, Walker said quietly. He keeps saying order like he's running a prison. I finally stepped forward. Mark, what do you actually want? He slapped his hand onto the podium. Access, override capability, control of this gate to prevent chaos. Chaos from who? I asked. The Amazon guy, a few neighbors snickered. Mark pointed at me. You have erected a personal fortification without consultation. It's not Fort Knox, Mike said. It's 4 feet high. The height isn't the issue, Mark screamed. The issue is that the HOA must be able to enter whenever necessary. Walker stepped forward. Stop saying that, Mark blinked. I beg your pardon? I said stop saying that, Walker repeated calmly. HOAs do not have entry authority. You don't get keys, you don't get codes, you don't get special permissions, not for gates. Not for garages, not for anything, Mark sputtered. But we require compliance. No, Walker said, you require cooperation. Those are different things. Mark turned to the crowd, sweating metaphorically even if his face stayed dry. Residents understand that if this gate remains, it sets a terrible precedent. Lewis raised a hand. Can I ask a question? Mark brightened. Yes, an informed citizen. Why do you want the override so badly? Lewis asked plainly. Like, what are you so desperate to get into his driveway for? The crowd murmured. Mark stiffened. It's standard procedure. No, Greg said. Be honest. Mark's face twitched. The HOA must retain boundary dominance. Walker nearly burst out laughing. Boundary dominance? Yes, Mark insisted. If we cannot enter a property, we lose control of the community. And that was it. That was the line. The air shifted. Every man standing there froze. Even Mark realized he'd said something deeply, catastrophically stupid. Walker stepped closer. Thank you, he said quietly. You finally said the quiet part out loud. Mark's eyes darted around. And no, I didn't mean. You absolutely did, Walker said. And now everyone here knows this isn't about aesthetics. It's about control. Mike whispered. He's cooked, completely cooked. Mark panicked. You all don't understand. He cannot be ALLOWED to have a private barrier. What? Walker asked. Because he's hiding something. Yes, Mark shouted and then realized what he'd said. Walker stared at him. What exactly do you think he's hiding? Mark stuttered. Could be anything. Or, I said, stepping forward, maybe I'm just protecting my property like any normal homeowner. The crowd murmured again. Mark's voice cracked. This is an attack on HOA authority. No, Walker said, this is you abusing your role. And then, just to make the moment perfect, a city vehicle turned the corner. Code enforcement. Walker nodded toward it. Good, he said. I called them. Mark's soul visibly left his body. And as the truck rolled to a stop, dust glinting in the bright afternoon sun, I knew this was the turning point Mark never saw coming, because now it wasn't just me and the sheriff standing against him, it was the law. The code enforcement truck rolled to a stop with a soft crunch of gravel, and the officer inside, an older, broad-shouldered man named Daniels, stepped out with a clipboard of his own, though his actually had authority behind it. The sunlight reflected off his badge as he approached, and the entire crowd instinctively shifted to give him space. Mark, unfortunately, did the exact opposite. He rushed toward Daniels like a man drowning who thought he'd found a lifeline. Officer Daniels. He shouted, waving both arms. Thank God you're here. This homeowner has installed a fortified illegal barrier without permission, and the HOA requires immediate enforcement assistance. Daniels blinked once slowly, the way a man does when he has already had enough nonsense for one day. A fortified what now? He asked. Mark pointed dramatically at my gate. This monstrosity. He is hiding behind a barrier that the HOA cannot control. Daniels looked at the gate, then at me, then at Sheriff Walker, who lifted an eyebrow and subtly shook his head like, you're about to hear the wildest story of your week. Daniels sighed. All right, someone explain what's actually going on here. Mark leaped in front of him. We are trying to maintain community order, but this man has installed a gate that locks out the HOA, and he refuses to give us the override code. Daniels stared at him. Override code. For his private property? Yes, Mark shouted. We must have access. Why? Daniels asked. That one-word question nearly broke Mark's brain. Because the community requires it. For what purpose? Daniels asked. Mark stuttered. Inspections, maintenance, compliance, travel. Daniels squinted. Compliance, travel? Walker smirked. Mark puffed up again, desperate. The HOA must maintain boundary dominance over private structures. Daniels' pencil stopped midair. He slowly turned to Walker. Did he just say boundary dominance? Walker nodded. He said it yesterday and 3 times today. Daniels scratched the back of his head. Well, I'm gonna need coffee before this gets sensible. Mike whispered. It won't. Daniels finally turned to me. Sir, is the gate blocking any public roadway? No, I said. It's fully on my land. Blocking emergency response? Nope, sheriff approved the specs. Walker nodded. Daniels turned back to Mark. Then what exactly do you think I'm here to enforce? Mark threw his hands up. He has compromised the visual spirit of the community. The HOA feels threatened by this gate's refusal to obey. Daniels stared like he couldn't believe he'd heard the sentence correctly. The gate refuses to obey, he repeated. The crowd snickered. Mark snapped, "Stop mocking me. This is a serious violation. If we allow this gate to remain, then anyone could install security without HOA input." Anarchy will spread, Greg whispered to Mike. Imagine a world where people secure their own property. Tragic, Mike whispered back. Daniels pinched the bridge of his nose so hard I thought he might leave a dent. Mr. Rudd, he said, the city has no regulations preventing private homeowners from installing security gates. If it doesn't block a public way, it's allowed. No, Mark shouted. No, that is unacceptable. You must force HIM to remove it. Daniels shifted his weight. That's not how it works. It must be removed. No, Daniels said, it doesn't. It will be removed, Mark screamed. The HOA has final say, and right then something snapped, not in the gate, not in the sheriff, but in Daniels. He stepped closer to Mark and lowered his voice. Let me be extremely clear, you have no authority here, none, zero. You don't override private installations, you don't demand entry codes, you don't declare sovereignty over someone's driveway. You don't get to act like law enforcement. You're an HOA president, not a sheriff, not a judge, not a government. The street went dead silent. Walker folded his arms behind him. The neighbors leaned in like spectators at a boxing match waiting for the knockout. Mark's mouth trembled. But the rules, the guidelines, the structure, the order, Daniels cut him off. What you're doing right now is harassment. If you attempt to physically access his property again, we will treat it as trespassing. Mark blinked rapidly. Trespassing? I am the HOA, Daniels said, and that means absolutely nothing to the law. That was it, the moment, the crack, the exact explosion point where Mark's ego hit its limit. His face twisted, his eyes widened, his whole body jolted like a cartoon villain short-circuiting. He let out a strangled noise, half outrage, half disbelief, and then spun around to the volunteer holding the bolt cutters. Give me those, he bellowed. The volunteer panicked. Sir, I really don't think… Now, Mark screamed, grabbing them with both hands. Daniels shouted, Rudd, don't you dare, but Mark was already charging. He stormed toward my gate like a charging bull, lifted the bolt cutters over his head and swung downward with a primal howl and hit nothing. Sheriff Walker had intercepted him mid-swing, one hand gripping the bolt cutters, the other on Mark's shoulder, holding him like a misbehaving teenager. Drop them, Walker said. Mark struggled. I must destroy THE barrier. Drop them, Walker repeated. Mark tried to yank the cutters free 3 times, each tug weaker than the last, until finally he gasped for breath, wilted, and let go. The cutters clanged onto the pavement. Daniels stepped beside Walker. That's it, he said. He's done. Mark's lip quivered. Why, you can't do this, you can't. I am the hoe. You're suspended, Daniels said. Effective immediately, pending city review. A collective sound rippled through the street, equal parts gasp, relief, and electric satisfaction. Harold, one of the board members who had been watching from a distance, walked forward with a folded sheet of paper. Mark, he said softly, the board voted this morning. You're removed as president. Mark staggered backward. And no, you can't. You need me. What we need, Harold said, is sanity. The papers fluttered in Harold's hand as he held them out. Mark didn't take them. He couldn't. He just stared, broken, as the illusion of power he'd built his whole identity on finally shattered in the sunlight. Walker stepped back. Daniels stepped away. Neighbors exhaled. And Mark, HOA titan, self-declared sovereign, gate-obsessed tyrant, collapsed onto the curb, muttering to himself as the afternoon breeze pushed gently against the still-standing, perfectly undamaged gate. And that was the moment I realized the fight was over, but the consequences, those were just beginning. The strange thing about an HOA tyrant's downfall is the sound that follows. It isn't cheering or gloating or even conversation. It's silence, the kind that settles over a neighborhood when everyone realizes the storm has finally passed. Mark sat slumped on the curb, arms hanging at his sides, staring blankly at the bolt cutters he no longer had the authority or courage to lift. The sun was high and bright, throwing long shadows across the pavement as Daniel's clipboard snapped shut with a finality that echoed like a judge's gavel. Sheriff Walker stepped back, giving Mark space but keeping a close eye on him, and the neighbors hovered nearby, murmuring quietly, the tension slowly dissolving into disbelief. Harold, still holding the folded letter of removal, crouched down beside Mark. Look, man, he said softly, we tried to tell you. The board told you. The residents told you. But you kept pushing this idea that the HOA could control everything. That's not how this works. Mark didn't answer, he just stared forward, his voice barely audible. I kept order, I kept this place running. Without me it all becomes chaos. Harold shook his head. No, without you people can breathe. That broke something. Mark's shoulders shook, not dramatically, not theatrically, just the small collapse of a man realizing his throne had always been cardboard. He stood slowly, wobbling a bit, brushing off his pants with jittery hands. I will appeal, he whispered. You can't just strip me of authority. Daniels crossed his arms. Authority you didn't actually have, Walker added. You abused the position, the consequences were overdue. Mark swallowed hard, then looked at me like he expected me to reach out and save him. You did this, he said. You destroyed everything I built. I stepped forward. You destroyed it yourself, Mark. All I did was put up a gate you couldn't handle. The neighbors nodded behind me, Mike, Greg, Lewis, Mr. Patterson, each of them confirming what Mark had been unwilling to accept. He turned toward the gate again, eyes scanning its edges like he was trying to find something wrong with it, something that justified all the chaos he'd caused. It's just, he muttered, so closed. That's kind of the point, Mike said. Mark's lips trembled. But when people lock their driveways, they lock their hearts. Greg coughed. Man, what? Mark blinked like he hadn't realized the poetic nonsense that fell out of his mouth. Daniels cleared his throat. Mr. Rudd, you're instructed to return all HOA materials, keys, documents, digital accounts within 24 hours. Failure to do so will result in charges. Mark flinched at the word charges. The sheriff stepped forward. And if you attempt to access this property again, you'll be cited. No exceptions. Even in the bright sunlight, Mark looked small. Not physically, he was a big man, but emotionally, spiritually, in the way a toppled dictator looks when he realizes his subjects aren't afraid anymore. Fine, he muttered. Fine, I'm leaving. And he did slowly, shoulders sagging, shoes scuffing against the pavement. The volunteers followed, unsure where to stand or what to say. Harold walked with him partway, speaking softly, trying to keep things civil, while the rest of the neighborhood collectively exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. As they disappeared around the corner, Mike stepped beside me. Well, he said, that was dramatic. That was Mark, I replied. Same thing. Walker tucked his hands into his jacket pockets. He'll calm down eventually, or he'll file 47 appeals. Hard to say with that guy. What happens now? I asked. Walker surveyed the street. Code enforcement will finalize a report. The HOA board will restructure. And you, he pointed at my gate, you get to keep your property secure without anyone demanding override privileges like they're running a spy agency. Greg snorted. Still can't believe he said boundary dominance. He also said the gate refuses to obey, Mike added. That's my new ringtone. I laughed despite myself. Sunlight glinted off the metal of my gate, and for the first time since installing it, I felt like it really meant something. Not just privacy, not just protection, but a line that said, this is mine, and you don't get to control it. Walker packed up his laptop, then glanced toward his own driveway. By the way, he said casually, word got around the station. If the HOA ever tries to pull this stunt again, you won't be handling it alone. Appreciated, I said. No problem, he replied. Just doing my job, even when it overlaps with Mark's fantasies of HOA supremacy. We all shared a good laugh at that. By early afternoon, neighbors drifted back to their homes, the drama settling into the kind of well-earned peace that only comes after absurd conflict. I stayed outside a little longer, adjusting the gate's alignment, tightening screws, checking the motor, small tasks that grounded me. At some point, I realized Walker was standing nearby again, watching me work. What's up? I asked. He nodded toward the street. City issued you an official clearance. He handed me a form. At the top, security installation approved, no violations found, owner fully within rights. I felt relief wash over me. Thanks, Sheriff. Don't thank me, he said. Thank the law and yourself for standing firm. I folded the paper and slid it into my flannel pocket. So that's it? I asked. Pretty much, Walker said. Mark won't be back. And if he does show up, he won't show up with authority. He paused, then smirked. At best, he'll show up with a pamphlet. I cracked a smile. A hostile pamphlet. The most dangerous kind, he agreed. We both looked at the gate again as the breeze rolled through the neighborhood, carrying the peaceful stillness that comes after a long battle finally ends. You did good, Walker said. Most people let HOAs bulldoze them with nonsense. You pushed back. Didn't feel like a choice, I said. Sometimes standing up isn't a choice, he replied. It's a line you draw, same as that gate. He headed back to his truck, raising a hand in a casual wave before climbing in and driving off down the street. And as the engine faded away, I realized something simple but powerful. The HOA had tried to override my gate, my authority, my control. But what they really underestimated was who lived next door. And a man with the law on his side, he's not someone you can override.